Eat, Sleep, Boxing, Repeat. Delighted to be joined as always by Paul Kelly, and we have a special guest on this week's Big Fight Breakdown. Our friend Kasper, who is from Poland. Kasper, thank you for your time this afternoon. I know you're joining us from Poland at the moment. Good afternoon, good evening. How are you? How has your day been?
Hi guys, everything's fine. I'm looking forward to talking about Okolie Cieslak fight. I think it's a brilliant fight. It went really under the radar, I think, in most of the boxing public. But I think that it's worth talking about because that's the toughest fight in Okolie's career, in my opinion.
Fantastic. Well, you mentioned it there, Lawrence Okolie, Cieslak, which happens on the 27th of February. So not too long to go now. We're here to discuss the fight, what we think is going to happen, who's going to win, how they're going to win. A couple of questions there. Kasper, I'll kind of kick off with you. What can you tell us about Cieslak? He's not that well known in this country. Obviously, we're very aware of Lawrence Okolie. We have other British cruiserweights as well. I think most of us are aware of Marius Breedis as well. How would you describe Cieslak in a nutshell to British fans?
Well, at the moment, he's the best Polish fighter. I think there's no doubt about it. He's a fighter who was supposed to fight Marius Breidis late in 2021. But that fight fell through for whatever reason. The main reason is that Cieslak has too many promoters. We are laughing here in Poland with that, but it wasn't really funny at that point because he was a mandatory challenger and everything was working towards that fight, but it fell through, and he was mad because he's in his prime and he was waiting for that fight, for that opportunity. And that fight with Okolie, it came out of nowhere, really, because we really thought that, he needs to sort his promotional status first before he can move to some bigger challenges. But here we go now. It was sorted. I think everyone's happy with that arrangement. Regarding Michal Cieslak's position in boxing, I think that his biggest test was that fight with Ilunga Makabu in Africa. I think he answered a lot of questions in that fight. He went full distance with game Ilunga Makabu, who was much better than in his latest fights with Durodola and with Mchunu last weekend. That was really tough, 12 rounds in his backyard, really. And the fight was crazy because there were many things working against Michal Cieslak in that fight. His promoters left in the morning because they were afraid that they may not leave with all the money after the fight. So it was crazy. They should really do a movie about that trip. But Michal, he was as cool as an assassin in there. He was down actually first in that fight. He got knocked down, but he got up and he hurt Makabu. And then a crazy thing happened. The round in which Makabu was down and hurt got cut short. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. All in all, Michal lost that fight, but he proved that he is, to me, that he's one of the top 10 guys in the division, and that he's a hell of a fighter, that he really improved in many aspects, because we weren't really sure how he would look when comparing him to the best fighters in the division, but he looked really, really well in that fight.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks for breaking this down for us. I don't know about Paul, but I wasn't too familiar with the Makabu fight. I know it was a close fight on paper, but it sounds like there were some troubles with going to the champions home country, which there are in boxing, which is an unfortunate thing about the sport. I think I'll just move on to Paul now. I think that Kasper, I know that Lawrence Okolie is the world champion here. I know you might know a fair amount about him. But Paul, like in a nutshell, to any kind of, we hope we're going to have some Polish viewers watching this video. How would you break Lawrence Okolie down in a nutshell? Someone who hasn't seen him fight before, what would you say?
First of all, talking to me.
Yeah.
First of all, I'd say for anyone that isn't aware of him and wants to become aware of him, ignore his first 12, 13, 14 fights and look at his last. 3 or 4 since he's gone and trained with Shane McGuigan, who's a great coach. It looks like, I think it's safe to say that over here in Britain, when it was kind of all of a sudden Okolie burst onto the scene because he'd been getting on these big shows and had been winning the likes of the Matty Askin fight and the Isaac Chamberlain fight, but it wasn't impressive. But then more recently, he's been very impressive, and I think he's really grown into and is well deserved to being the world champion. I think obviously the performance against Glowacki was sensational. I think he's really started to learn how to use his attributes. You know what I mean? He's the biggest cruiserweight out there, 6'5". He'd be a big heavyweight, never mind a big cruiserweight. He's really started to use his range, his length, punching on the outside. Whereas before he was known for holding and stuff quite a bit, which is not necessary when you've got the size and stature that he has. I would say that yes, recently, if you're going to have a look at Okolie, definitely look at his more recent fights because he's come on leaps and bounds in the last year to 18 months.
Definitely, no, 100%. Nice breakdown there, Paul. Thank you. He's definitely changed a lot as a fighter. So, Casper, I kind of have to ask you: have you seen a lot of Okolie? And Paul mentioned Okolie's fight against your countryman Glowacki last year, where he won the world title. Were you impressed with that performance? Were you impressed with that win? Were you surprised at Okolie's performance there? Give us your thoughts.
He's highly impressive in his last fights. I think he's one of the most improved fighters in the sport of boxing recently. Well, I never thought watching him at 2016 Olympics that from that UK team, he will be the first fighter to become the world champion and to improve so much, because I watched him from his first fights with Matchroom. And really, he was unwatchable at times. That's the truth. But under Shane McGuigan, he is a completely different fighter. I think he controls the pace of the fight better. He can use his range better. He's got his 1-2, which is his most powerful weapon. Yeah, he is one of the best fighters in the cruiserweight division. I don't know if he's number 1 or number 2, but that's up to that's debatable. But his fights with Polish fighters, well, he beat Jakubowski at the Olympics. He beat Rusiewicz in one of his first pro fights. Then he beat Jerzewski and recently Głowacki. So that's 4. And I think that Michal Cieslak might be the toughest one out of this bunch. And I think that he's the one from this group that he's in his prime. And also he's got the style to really give Lawrence fits.
Okay, but yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a very interesting fight. I wonder if Cieslak will want some revenge for the amount of Polish people that Lawrence Okolie has come against, but perhaps we will see. Just wanted to ask about the fight itself. I feel like Okolie has won most of his fights by stoppage, especially the last couple. Casper, how much of a puncher do you think Cieslak is? I think he's 21 wins, 15 stoppages. Is that a fair representation of how hard he can hit? And if he's going to win this fight, do you think it's has to be by stoppage, or do you think it's more like to be on points?
He needs to push for that stoppage. That's really the only way he can win this fight, because I don't think if Lawrence dictates the pace and does what he can do so well, this will be a tough fight. But Michal can apply the pressure. He's really good in that regard, and he really improved when talking about how big of a puncher he is. He's a much better puncher now than he was 2 or 3 years ago. I think the credit must go to his coach Andrzej Liczyk, who is one of the young Polish coaches, but he's really on a roll recently, and his work with Cieslak is really outstanding. And Cieslak hits hard. He stopped Kalenga, Durodola, Mabika. So in his last fight, he knocked out with a single punch Yuri Kashinsky, a guy from Russia, who was at the time in the top 10 of the ring, if I remember correctly. And that fight got stopped too early, probably, yes, but he was really hurt from his single punch. So that's a fact. And I think that in order to win that fight, Michal needs to apply the pressure. He really needs to take this fight to Okolie. He's got some range on him as well. He is really a decent boxer. That's another thing that got better with Licik. So there are many ways to win this fight, but I think that the goal for Michal Cieslak is to apply the pressure, to cut the ring, and to really take this fight to Okolie.
Okay, well, it's interesting to see how he goes about that fight. No, as we said, he can really punch hard, and I question whether Okolie has faced somebody who can punch as hard as him in the professional game. So it's going to be very interesting. Paul, coming back to you, I know you're likely to know more about Okolie than Cieslak, but are you somebody that sees Okolie as the number one in the division? And is there anyone in the division you can see beating him, or are you quite focused on the fact that he is the number one in the division at the moment?
I think right now I still would have to favour Maris Briedis as the number one, to be honest, but just with the names that he's beaten. I know recently he's kind of seems to have gone off the rails calling out certain celebrities, but no, and actually in terms of his in-ring antics, I think Briedis is probably still number one. However, if that fight happened, say, in a year's time, I would maybe favour Okolie, but I don't think you can put Okolie right to number one in the division yet. You know, he has only had one defence of his title against Prazovic, I believe, who then obviously ended up getting stopped by another Brit, Isaac Chamberlain, in one round. So again, that's probably not the most notable win. So it's interesting. I think he's probably definitely number two. I agree with what Kasper's saying there. I think he definitely has to have him as number two in the division. But yeah, I agree. I think although Glowacki on paper was a great win, and a lot of people didn't expect Okolie to win in that fashion, I think that Glowacki was possibly a wee bit past his prime. I'm sure you'd agree, Kasper. But yes, what you say about Cieslak being in his prime, I think that's quite important, because he's a big lad himself. He's 6'3", I believe. So yeah, although Okolie's going to be the bigger man, he's still a big man himself, Cieslak. So I think this could definitely be the toughest test of Lawrence's career so far.
Brilliant. And Kasper, would you agree with Paul? Would you have Briedis number one, Okolie number two, or would you have someone else number one, number two? Where are your rankings at the moment?
Well, I think we need to take into consideration the achievements. So that puts Briedis on the top of my list. But Okolie might be better right now, and the time works in his favor between him and Briedis. But Briedis, he gave the toughest fight to Usyk. Well, that counts, and he beat Dorticos in the final of the second edition of World Boxing Super Series. So we need to go with him. He's the number one guy. Although that pursuit of Jake Paul, it's really crazy. It's really ridiculous, and I would love to see him fighting Okolie. I think that's the biggest fight in cruiserweight division right now, and there is a lot of money to be made, especially in the UK. So that's a great fight, and I think that he should just stop pursuing Jake Paul. He won't get that fight. Jake Paul is not in boxing to fight champions. He's in it to make money, and he prefers other ways than to fighting the best boxers. So that fight will never happen 100%.
I agree. It doesn't make too much sense for Jake Paul, I don't think. Cool. Okay, gents. I think we've covered a fair amount here. I just have one final question for both of you. At this stage, I would like a prediction from both of you and a method of victory, ideally. Paul, I know you're never biased, so I just want an honest prediction from you, please. I'm going to go to you first. Who wins this fight and how?
I think Okolie wins, and I'm actually going to say I think that it could go the distance. I think Okolie might win on points. I think he might have to box smart, because Cieslak will prove a tough test, and I could see him being a unanimous decision points victory. Not winning every round, maybe an 8-4, a 9-3. Not drastically wide, but not too close either. But I do think he'll get the job done and then win on points.
Okay, fantastic. And Casper, same question. Who's going to win this fight and how?
Well, I expect Okolie to win. I think it's like 60-40 in his favor, but the Cieslak is really a live dog in this fight, and I think that his stamina may be the key to the victory. And he really can, if he really can apply the pressure and cut the ring like he says he can, and he can really take this fight to Okolie, then there is a really big chance to get this win. But I need to be honest, and I think that Okolie is really a much improved fighter, and he will be the favorite, no doubt about it.
We will see. Well, I think this is with no doubt the toughest fight of Lawrence Okolie's career. I think there's a chance that bigger unification fights, he's kind of looking at those, and maybe there's a chance he's overseeing Cieslak. Who knows? But I think this is kind of going a bit under the radar in Britain because there are other big fights happening in this country in February. But I think this is actually going to be a tough fight for Okolie and an entertaining fight. Gents, thank you so much for both of your time. As always, you made me look forward to this fight even more now. And yeah, it would be great to catch up with both of you post-fight as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good evening. Bye-bye.